Happy 2025. As indicated before, we are going to be doing this book, The Little Book of Zen Healing, Japanese Ritual for Beauty, Harmony, and Love by Paula Arai, Dr. Paula Arai. And I did interview her, or Reverend Dana Tatagi did, on Opening Dharma Access, the podcast. I say you should go listen to it if you haven't already. Essentially, this year, I thought as a topic, which I think is useful during these times, is on healing. I'm actually going to start with the foreword. Pico Iyer.
Iyer.
Thank you. Medicine for the mind. When my father-in-law passed away in Kyoto, and then my mother-in-law, then my wife's uncle, I marveled at the clarity of everything that followed. At precisely the moment when most of us are at a loss, grieving, angry, confused, the Japanese have refined a set of rites whereby everybody knows where he or she or they must go, what they must do, which prayers they must recite. It's not, as Paula Arai reminds us in these pages, a way of taking the heart out of existence. It's rather a way of bringing humanity into the everyday and guiding us through the uncertainty that's part of every life. And I want to pause here and say that that sentence, of course, let's face it, this book is not for the Japanese national market. So it is, and it's probably not necessarily for the Japanese American market. So it's probably for the dominant market. And she's big enough, Paula Arai. So this part we're here where it's not, as Paula Arai reminds us in these pages, a way of taking the heart out of existence. There is, as we noted during our study of Crooked Cucumber, and if you are in the mainstream of convert Buddhism, there's a sense that a lot of Buddhism that has to do with the ethnic community is very much, and it is talked about as Soto Zen in Japan, that it's all about ritual and not enough, meditation. And so to me, the sentence is actually saying it's not that. It's a view that's mistaken. And in fact, this book will show you that mistake. Then the other piece, which isn't reflected in the sentence, but we'll get if you read, as we read this book, is, and Paula Arai makes very clear, if you listen to her at all, is that Soto Zen, as in most of Buddhism, and probably maybe we could say in many religions, that's my take, is very patriarchal. And so it is often set up as a sense in which men are, and to be perfectly honest, it is said that Soto Zen, especially monastic practice, is very much geared towards young men. It's very, and very like everything's fast, everything's hard, everything's just go, go, go. And so it is very much geared towards a certain kind of group of people. And so there's this really kind of putting down of women's experience. When I was in Thailand in 2006, when I was a monastic, now I always knew, in Thailand, which I think if you want to see a Buddhist country in action, Thailand is the place to go, or a place to go. It's very much a Buddhist country. And when a monk wants to, on a bus, on any public transportation, if the bus is full, or the bus that's on the river, right, then people will willingly get off the bus so that a monastic can ride the bus. And it's always monks, and they get the front seat. Nuns It didn't apply to nuns. When I was there, nuns were just, so education was also free to monastics, but not to nuns, right? To male monastics. But when I was there in 2006-07, it was just starting that nuns could also have free education. So that was a big deal. And so the sense of women's role in Soto Zen in particular, or Rinzai Zen, there's some of this in there, then it isn't part of practice. So that's also partly why we're doing this book. So we also hear, of course, that ritual can be instead of meditation, but really it is part of our practice. And hopefully, again, it's something you've heard from me before. So, and I appreciate this. It's rather a way of bringing humanity into the everyday and guiding us through the uncertainty that's part of every life. I think at moments in which we go, what the fuck, right? Which many of us are in right now after the election. I'll just be really upfront, right? We're like, what? There is a certain sense of loss. It's a kind of death of a dream, of a thing, a sense. I know that I thought, oh, we were going to make history. We were going to have a chance here, right? And so it is a loss, a sense of loss, a sense of discombobulation of what are we going to do now? What will be useful? What will be supportive? So this is in part why I have chosen healing as our topic. The other thing is that, of course, ritual, just as Zazen, can be rote, right? If we just do it just to do its sake, to look good. This is also why, you know, you've heard me, I hope, say that Katagiri Roshi always says, you know, like, you don't go do Zazen when you're feeling angry, because it isn't a way to fix your anger. Right? So you don't do practice to fix something. So you don't do something in a way that is not of the greatest commitment, so to speak, to the essence of it. So when we do something in a rote way, ritual can be, Zazen can be, meditation can be. So what is it that isn't that? And I'll say it again, to me, and this is what we are practicing, is how do we commit? How do we commit to what we're doing wholeheartedly? And as you well know, I love words, so commitment comes from the Latin 14th century verse, committent, give in charge, entrust. And then from committere, I don't know Latin, united, connect, combine, bring together. So when we commit on a certain level, we give up some power in a way, or a sense of power, right? To entrust means to hand over, I say. And yet at the same time, it's in the effort of uniting, connecting, combining, bringing together. So are we willing to give up just our sense of how things are? That's the asking of the commitment. The asking of commitment isn't, of course, about, you know, give it all to me and I'll just have power over you. That's not what we're talking about. We're saying, is there a way to do this in a way that engages me, but not just with myself, but with you and with the world? So that's the kind of commitment or the kind of vow that we're talking about. That goes into rituals. When we do ritual, you know, we don't just do it for ourselves. All right, I'll continue here. It's often been noted that the Buddha was at the heart a doctor of the mind. I'll say mind and heart. Remember, heart and mind are not separate in Buddhism. Neither perfect nor immortal, but committed at every moment to coming trying to heal our unease. I'll read it again. It's often been noted that the Buddha was at heart a doctor of the mind, neither perfect nor immortal, but committed at every moment to trying to heal our unease. Whenever I talk with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as I've been doing for 48 years now, what strikes me most is his blend of engagement and humility. No physician can save us from death or pain or old age, but any of us, he stresses, can, if we are so disposed, liberate ourselves some of the needless suffering that attachment, aversion, and distraction brings. I hope you hear a lot of Buddhism in that one paragraph. What is the first one? What is the Buddha diagnose? Right? Attachment, yeah, so that's the three. But before that, we even talk about what is the physician, the Buddha as a physician, what is that talking about? You guys know this. Some of your mouth is moving. Are you moving it or are you trying to say something? Okay. The Four Noble Truths, right? So the first noble truth is the diagnosis. There is suffering, there's hurt, there's harm. Next is, what is the origin of the cause, or what is the cause of our suffering, right? What is the cause of this illness? Then he gave us a prognosis for our disease. Right? What could happen, right? If you don't want to have this illness, then the third noble truth is you can have an alleviation or an ending of this illness. And then the prescription is the Eightfold Path. So the very classic framing of the Four Noble Truths. So this is how when you say here that the Buddha is physician, this is what a framing of it. Very classic again. Now, at the bottom, though, is what is it that we're healing from? Liberate ourselves from some of the needless suffering that attachment, aversion, and distraction brings. I would call these the three forms of reactivity. And ranging from the spectrum of attachment to grasping. Right? You can have attachment, but it gets to the point of grasping, right? Like, I like this water bottle. I like these stickers. This is mine. That's the kind of attachment. But if I am so into it that you cannot have it, then that's a grasping. So attachment in itself doesn't have to be bad. And it's at times we need that, you know? Caring about something is a form of attachment. There's wise attachment and then there's unwise attachment. And we're practicing to see which part of being attached brings us more suffering, or which part of attachment is part of life. So what about the next one is attachment aversion. Now, aversion can go all the way to rejecting. It's one thing to avert or to go, I don't really care for that. It's another to reject it completely. Now, we were thinking about like the political field, right? Where is it that, yeah, I can disagree, I can have aversion, but what do I do to what point that I actually reject? And that might be okay, like, you know, sometimes it's wise to, like, say, not watch too much news, right? But where does it come when someone is trying to connect with you and you just reject them as without giving them any sense of interaction? So to do that without engagement, or at what point do you get to the point of rejection And does that actually help? There's one, it's a different thing to say for my safety, or I cannot be with this right now, or I need a break, to just reactive rejection. So this is where we need to kind of have a sense. When is it reactivity and not skillful boundaries, you could say. And then in terms of the last one, and distraction. What do we do distraction? What are we trying to do when we're distracting ourselves? What are we trying to do? Is that a hand? Oh, yes, Sami.
No, well, for myself, I'm usually trying to feel something other than what I'm feeling.
So you're disengaging.
Yeah.
Would you say it's a kind of disengagement?
From whatever's arising in the moment.
Right. So distraction can be a kind of, remember all the hindrances mean to cover up, right? So those are one way that the Buddha taught as kind of classic way of when you can't be with something, you respond in that way. So I would say the range here, just as I said, from attachment to grasping, from aversion to rejecting, is disengagement to disassociation. Think about the political climate. Where is it that there's so much actually right now disassociating from things? Trauma can, when is it about disengagement and when is it about disassociation? Where do we turn away in a way that we leave ourselves, you could say? I say disengagement to disassociation. You could say it's kind of like I'm out of here to I gotta go. Or to the point of I'm not here or I can't be present for this. Just think when that comes up, or when you feel that the need to distract, how much of that is from this sense of I need to disengage, or I am disengaged. Now sometimes it's wise. I'm not saying, again, this is not about, but the three poisons are places to pay attention. When do they become, in a way, poison? It doesn't mean that we take medicine to cure certain things, and sometimes the side effects, they're not that good for you in the long run. So medicine sometimes has side effects that can be considered poisonous. So it isn't the reason we use the poison, we could say, is one way to look at it. Another is to what extent does it poison us? Or poison our relationship with another or with the world. So in a way we could say, though, that to me, our practice is actually not to the point in which we say, I can't be present for what is. Right? What we're healing is our ability to be able to be present. I want to heal myself so I can stay present for what is here. Doesn't always mean it's easeful. If you're sick, if you're dying, that's a dukkha dukkha. You can't escape that in life. And how do we stay with that in a way that gives us a sense that we can have some skillfulness with this? So we want actually to lean in. We're here for the long game, as I said before. So another way to put that is we are committed to what is present. We can understand that these are reactive tendencies we have. And so what is it as a response? How does reaction become the possibility of response? Notice I didn't say that the way that you react is a response, right? How can we frame something? It might be the same response, it might be the same action, but is it from a response, from awareness, intention, commitment? He continues. The beauty of living in Japan for me, so this is about himself, is that everywhere I look, I see everyday examples of how a wider sense of self-activated compassion can sweeten life and heal its stresses. The key word in here that I stress is can. Everyday example of how a wider sense of self and an activated compassion can sweeten life and heal its stressors. In a way, these two things here is the point of a practice, to have a wider sense of self. A sense of self that can hold all things. Widen your window of tolerance. Trauma narrows us. Difficulty, overwhelmness, stressors narrow us and track us. How do we practice knowing? It's not like you have to get a wider sense of self. You are a wider sense of self. A wider sense of self is always possible. You guys came on here and we're already a wider sense of self. You guys all knew that, right? You're happy to be here because Sangha gives you a wide sense of self, does it not? And how do we have that wider sense of self? We feel connected to each other. We care about each other. We're happy for each other. We're sad for each other. We're there for each other. That's the wider sense of self that's always present. We feel it more Monday night from 6 to 7:30 Pacific time. But it's always present, isn't it? And every week we mark our knowing it by having something called Access to Zen meditation group. That's all. This is when we practice knowing this so that the other, however many days of the week there's, you can remember that you are a wider sense of self. And when we have a wider sense of self, an activated compassion. It was activated when you came. You were all happy to be here. I didn't say maybe it is not a little bit complex at times or a little sticky. I didn't say that was impossible, but it is possible. This is when a wider sense of self, the natural response. This is a teaching of Buddhism, and I firmly believe it. Try it on for yourself. When you have a wider sense of self, your capacity for compassion increases. So it can, and for most of us, it can sweeten life and heal its stresses. There's nothing fancy or theoretical about it. There's nothing fancy or theoretical about it. Very, very pragmatic. The more and more I practice, the more I realize how pragmatic I have become, which actually is such a relief, I'll have to tell you. I used to be so attached to my sense of being an idealistic person. And in fact, I was afraid of losing my idealism. I have not lost any of my idealism. What I've gained is pragmatism. How do I fucking make it happen? With others in particular. And that's what we're doing with access to Zen. It's not theoretical or fancy, which doesn't mean at time we don't put on hats and sing and do fancy things, those damn forms. You know, my robes, I'm pretty fancy in my robes, right? But it's very real. So he names a few. A neighbor looks out for a stranger's child. A friend at the health club reminds me that the autumn leaves are a lesson in changelessness and change. My wife lays out fresh food and tea for her departed parents every morning. Even in a 7-Eleven, a teenager hands over my Kit Kat as if it's a blessing and a grace. You know, of course, in Japan, you hand everything two-handed. And if you practice at Zen Center, in the Soto Zen, we carry everything with two hands. Everything. As much as possible, we carry things with two hands. Your bowls, your rakusu in its envelope. You carry a cushion to your seat. If you need a different cushion, you don't just like swing it as we walk into the Zendo. We hold it, right? And your rakusu goes up to eye level. We're saying this is sacred. We mark this by really saying this has meaning. This is important. I am committed to making this a real manifestation of my commitment to be fully engaged and present. That's what we're doing when we step into the meditation hall. That's why there's that form. You know which foot. It's like the marker. It's the mindfulness practice, and it's the marker that says, this is the moment that I'm really concentrating here. Of course, in sesshin and retreat, we do it all the time. We extend that out. We walk around and shashu. We have other forms, other ways, keep our eyes down. Everything is about this commitment. That's what the forms are, and we are going to do a little bit more forms this year, but in an easeful way, because we want to really bring our body into it. How do we make this really practical, not theoretical? How happy I am, therefore, that Paula Arai has brought her open heart and close acquaintance with a group of wise and humble Japanese women together to suggest what many of us most need in an ever more disoriented world. The pharmacy is right here, she might be telling us. And those who have walked the path before us know that the medicine is within. We'll discuss more what within means. Every one of the women she highlights here might be bringing us a practical and kind recollection of the reassuring message I received soon after I quit Midtown Manhattan for Japan. Take care of the mind and heart, the rags, the cushion, and you take care of the world. Taking care is the key here. We practice taking care of everything, especially the things we are mostly careless about, which for many of us are things, and also, I hate to say it, for many of us are people or other beings. And in fact, the ones we think we care least about is the one we actually need to lean into. Where is it that you don't pay attention? That's where we lean in. Take care of the mind, the heart, the rags, the cushion, and you take care of the world. Follow in the footsteps of all who have come before you, and you forge a fresh path into tomorrow. As we learned last year, what was the theme of last year? Lineage. Because what we know, we learned and was taught to us, and that's okay. We can't get away from that. And every moment, and I think at moments like this, like what we call a new year, is a moment to say, how do I take what has been given to me? Right? We have a moment we can just really notice, right? What is it that I want to have refresh? What is it that I want to carry on? What is it that I make a resolution to do better or different or in a more compassionate way? What is it that I'm willing to commit to? That's one of the things that's so important about a new year. How do we life in some ways is how do we take us and make it into meaning now? That works now. We're doing it already, by the way. So our practice is how do we become more conscious of how we are making meaning and what are we committed to? Every moment you're committed to something, right? For most of us, maybe it's just what shirt I'm going to wear today and the look that I think or the person I will be. I went to look at apartments today. I put on a shirt, not just a t-shirt. So it doesn't make it bad, mind you. And how much of that is conscious, intentional, and with what motivation? With what motivation are you living? How do you make the past be the tomorrow you want by taking care of the present? Thank you for listening.